Kriti Mehta and you're watching The World Report. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. Kremlin aide Ushakov says Russia has received the latest version of the US peace plan on Ukraine. Kremlin calls parts of the latest US plan to end Ukraine war as positive. As the conundrum over Russia-Ukraine peace deal grows, Ukraine hints at hope, says common understanding reached with United States on peace deal aimed at ending war with Russia. US President Donald Trump has said that the proposal for Ukraine peace deal has been fine-tuned with collaboration of both Russia and Ukraine, and US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will be meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin next week. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has stated that the president has hinted that he may hold up to 4 in-person meetings with Chinese President Xi Jinping next year, marking an unprecedented level of high-level US-China contact. This comes as China agrees to buy at least 87.5 million metric tons of US grain over 3.5 years. European Union Chief von der Leyen says you will support Ukraine every step of the way until peace, as Ukraine's future lies in the European Union. She says peace plans should ensure real security for Ukraine and Europe, and any agreement should deliver a just and lasting peace. German Chancellor says Putin cannot leave Ukraine war successfully. Merz added that they want to end the war as quickly as possible while speaking in the lower house of parliament. The European Union will accelerate its plan to use frozen Russian state assets to underpin a €140 billion loan to Ukraine, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has said on Wednesday. The British government's decision to ban pro-Palestinian campaign groups Palestine Action as a terror organization will be challenged in court on Wednesday. And we have some breaking news coming in at top of the bulletin, viewers. At least 4 people have been killed in a major fire that has engulfed a residential building in Hong Kong's northern Tai Po district. Thick grey smoke was seen coming out of the structure as emergency crews worked to contain the blaze. According to the police reports, several people are trapped inside and 1 man has suffered serious burns. The fire department says it received the first call at 2:51 p.m. local time after flames broke out in Wang Fuk Court. The alarm level was quickly raised to a number 4 at 3:34 p.m., signaling a severe incident. Wang Fuk Court is a large housing complex made up of 8 blocks with nearly 2,000 residential units. Several surrounding towers are covered in bamboo scaffolding, adding complications for firefighters battling the blaze. And now moving on to the top focus on Eurozone. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he is ready to move forward on a US-backed framework to end the conflict and to discuss the most sensitive issues directly with President Trump, with Europe involved in the talks. But major gaps remain, key fears being pressured into a deal that could force territorial concessions to Moscow. Zelensky has called on European leaders to help establish a long-term reassurance force for Ukraine and emphasized that security discussions must include the countries affected. Meanwhile, US President Trump has said that modification in the proposed peace plan has been made in collaboration with both the warring countries, while there are reports of disagreements. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is confirmed to visit Moscow in the coming week to discuss the Ukraine peace plan. All right, let's bring in our guests, Gilbert Doctorow, who's a Russian affairs expert. He's joining us live from Brussels. We also have Andrew Latham, who's an international relations expert, and he joins us from Minneapolis. I extend you both a very warm welcome and thank you for joining us here at NewsX World. I want to come to you first, Gilbert Doctorow. Now, Kremlin says it is in possession of the revised plan, and it calls it rather positive. It also says that part of the latest U.S. plan to end the war are very positive. What do you think some of these points that Russia says are positive could be, and what are the others on which it would like some amendments?
I'd like to call out the fact that the Kremlin is not speaking with one voice. And obviously there are at the highest levels of the Russian government divided opinions on how to proceed with this peace plan. Yesterday, Mr. Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, made a very severe criticism of the entire peace plan procedures. He was accusatory for the Trump use of back channels to conduct this, instead of going through the traditional diplomatic service, namely the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, of which he is in charge, and its counterpart, the State Department in the United States. The results of this, in Lavrov's words, were unacceptable leaks to the public, which interfered with the confidential, behind closed doors nature, which is essential for such delicate negotiations to take place. Indirectly, of course, Mr. Lavrov was criticizing his boss. Now, when you have quoted Mr. Ushakov, he is not a diplomat. He was a diplomat, but his service today is as an advisor to the president. And he is, understandably, defending the back channel approach, which he thinks has resulted in something good. I don't see how. When I look at the other remarks that you have made in listing the top news of the day, there is nothing that good that can come out of this revised plan from Ukraine. Particularly, I call attention to what you have said about Ursula von der Leyen and the disposition of the frozen Russian assets. Since that provision has been removed from the draft plan, it is clear that the European Union intends to confiscate the Russian assets for the benefit of continuing the war. This is not a viable way forward.
All right. I now want to bring in Andrew Latham into the discussion. And Andrew, I would start by asking you to first respond to what Gilbert Doctorow's opinions are.
I'm in a broad agreement. No state in human history has ever formed and executed foreign policy as rational actors with one person calling all the shots. There's always bureaucratic politics. That's true on the American side with Steve Witkoff running around behind the scenes, and Marco Rubio not being sort of the principal in all of this. So not surprising, but an important insight to share with your viewers. In terms of where we are, I think we are in a classical diplomatic moment. The United States, think back to, for example, the Korean War, how that ended. The United States was the chief architect of that. North and South Korea had marginal inputs ultimately. And then there were other players, in this case, the European Union, almost pathetically, but nevertheless, trying to muscle their way into the room and to have some say in how this is all going to shake out. Again, maybe my colleague and I might disagree on the margins, but I think we're in broad agreement as to where we are and how we got here, and what's likely to happen in the not too distant future.
Well, that does appear to be a positive step forward given both your perspectives there. But now I request you both to stay on with us as we have some more information to give our viewers. That as per Kremlin, the parts of the US proposal to end the war are positive, but many elements still need detailed discussion. Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov has told that several points require expert-level talks before Moscow can respond. Moscow also confirmed that US envoy Steve Witkoff, along with other senior American officials, will travel to Russia next week for negotiations on a possible peace plan. Now, President Trump said that US negotiators are making progress with both Ukraine and Russia, and that Moscow has already agreed to some concessions. But the US-based framework has raised fresh concerns that Ukraine could be pushed toward a deal seen as favorable to Moscow. Ushakov also addressed the leak of a phone call between Kremlin and US officials, calling it an attempt to undermine the peace effort. Report says that Witkoff suggested both sides work together on a ceasefire plan and that Putin raised the issue directly with Trump. And viewers, let's also tell you that there is a reaction coming in from European Union leader Ursula von der Leyen, saying that Europe will continue backing Ukraine every step of the way and will keep up pressure on Russia until there is a just and lasting peace. Addressing European Union lawmakers, she described the revised US peace framework as a starting point, but stressed that far more work is needed. Von der Leyen said Ukraine's future lies in the European Union and insisted that any agreement must deliver real security for both Europe and Ukraine. She also welcomed efforts led by President Trump to push forward a peace plan, calling the current moment dangerous but also an opportunity for progress. All right, I now want to bring in Andrew Latham first into the discussion. Andrew, there's been a sentiment in the European Union that Ukraine has not been as included in the discussions as the Russian side probably is. And there have been several statements coming in the past that any peace plan cannot be finalized without Ukraine and Europe. Now, even as talks were held between US and Ukraine officials in Geneva, there were also talks that were held rather secretively, given that they were not announced in Abu Dhabi between Russian officials and the United States. And Ukraine may have some reason to worry there, even though it does say that the outcomes of the revised plans may be positive.
Well, I think when we look at what Ursula von der Leyen has been saying, the subtext is not that Ukraine is being marginalized or excluded, but that the European Union is. I think to hit on that bureaucratic politics note, what we see with the European Union and Ursula von der Leyen in particular is a recognition that NATO membership for Ukraine is off the table. But European Union membership is not off the table, and this is an opportunity for the European Union, not only to extend its geographical scope, but extend in a way that's unprecedented, really, its role in security and defense affairs. It's not that they have no role, but it's NATO has been the major player, and I think she sees an opportunity to expand the reach of her organization. Having said that, the war between Russia and Ukraine is a European issue, and Europe has some role to play. It should make sure that this peace agreement serves European interests, not just American interests, not just Russian interests, not even just Ukrainian interests, but Europe's interests as well. So I see this again as her simply playing a rather predictable role on the international diplomatic stage, advancing her institution's interests, advancing her region's interests, and if I were really uncharitable, advancing her own interests as well.
Mr. Doctor, do you really think that Europe has largely been marginalized, as are the charges, is also what Andrew Latham seems to be thinking of the opinion that von der Leyen has raised? Mr. Doctor, could you unmute yourself, please? No, you are still not audible.
All right.
All right. Before we go back to our guests, let's also, in fact, tell you viewers that Kremlin is pushing back against Europe's role in efforts to end the war in Ukraine. Now, senior aide Yuri Yushkov criticized European governments for meddling, saying their involvement in peace discussions is unnecessary. The comments come as Kyiv and several European Union capitals fear that Washington and Moscow could strike key agreements without them at the table. Now, at the same time, Russia's foreign ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova accused European politicians and media as well of trying to disrupt moves towards a settlement. Now, the sharp remarks highlight growing tensions over who gets to shape any future peace deal as diplomatic efforts intensify on multiple fronts. All right, Mr. Doctor, you were giving your opinions, but we were unable to hear you. I request you to continue, please.
Well, let me go straight to your last point. The fundamental question for the European Union is, do they accept that Russia is winning the war or has nearly won the war and Ukraine is losing the war or has lost it already? That is a fundamental question. And since von der Leyen does not accept who is the winner and who is the loser, the contribution of Europe can be only destructive, not constructive. She is not looking after the interests of Europe. They were looked after in the talking points of the 28-point plan, which spoke about essentially about this, everyone sitting together and revising the security architecture of Europe on the assumption that the agreement over Ukraine would resolve once and for all the differences between Russia and Ukraine, and there's no need for a massive backup to secure Ukraine, but in terms of European soldiers and weapons on the ground. If there is a definitive peace, you don't need all of that. And that puts an end to the remilitarization of Europe that von der Leyen is trying to oversee. There is no need for an ongoing, forever confrontation between Russia and Europe, except to keep the 24 out of 27 European prime ministers in power, because their power depends on conflict.
All right. Well, now I request you to stay on, both of you, Mr. Doctor and Mr. Latham. I just want to tell our viewers that Russian forces have also launched a mass drone attack on the southeastern Ukrainian city of Zaporizhia. Now, regional governor Ivan Fedorov says the strikes ignited fires, injured 19 people, and caused widespread damage to buildings there and to vehicles. He reported that shops were destroyed while 31 apartment blocks and 20 private homes were damaged. 8 of the injured are being treated in a hospital. Fedorov added that rescue operations are underway at 12 locations with emergency services, police and medical teams fully deployed. Meanwhile, firefighters have been battling blazes in high-rise buildings and severely damaged cars. In related developments, Ukraine's Air Force says it shot down 72 out of 90 drones as well as 2 ballistic missiles in a country-wide overnight attack. Meanwhile, official Yevgeny Belitsky claims Ukrainian forces struck power infrastructure in Russian-held areas, cutting electricity to about 40,000 customers. All right. I want to take an opinion from Andrew Latham on that. Andrew, even as there seems to be a consensus that could be arrived on as far as the peace plan is concerned, shellings continue and infrastructure in both the countries is being damaged. When do you think is this really going to stop?
Well, it will stop when the ink finally dries on the agreement, and it may not even stop then. There may be residual exchanges of volleys of fire. But this is not really all that surprising. We're in the midst of a negotiation. In fact, it's overdetermined. On the one hand, both sides are simply carrying out their strategic bombing campaigns, one against oil infrastructure, the other against energy infrastructure, as a means of undermining the respective parties' ability to prosecute this war. But it's more than that now. It's also a bargaining chip. Look what we can do to you if you don't make this concession or that concession. Do you really think that holding out on this is worth suffering that? And so I see it as I said, overdetermined and unlikely to end until both sides make the determination that the deal on the table is better than continuing this grinding stalemate of a war. And I'm not sure that's going to take days. I'm hoping it's weeks, and I'm really hoping it's not months or nightmare scenario years from now.
Okay. Well, do stay on with us as there are opinions that have also come in from Germany, where Chancellor Friedrich Merz has said that Russian President Vladimir Putin must accept the peace plan and that he has no option to leave the war in Ukraine successfully, while emphasizing that Russia-Ukraine war must end quickly. Now, the Chancellor added that Germany would continue to support the Ukrainian people and would use frozen Russian assets for that purpose. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that he is ready to advance a US-backed framework for ending the war with Russia and discuss disputed points with US President Donald Trump in talks he said should include European allies. And with that, viewers, let's also tell you that Ursula von der Leyen says that the Commission is now ready to present its legal text on the possible use of Russian frozen assets. The move comes as European Union members continue to debate how such immobilized funds could be utilized. Meanwhile, Russia has prepared its own response to any potential seizure of those assets by Western nations. Justice Minister Konstantin confirmed that the measures have been fully drafted and submitted to the country's leadership. He described any confiscation of Russian frozen assets as a clear violation of international law, warning that it would make the countries involved liable for damages. The developments mark an escalation in the ongoing dispute over more than 200 billion euros in Russian funds frozen in Europe. And I want to bring in Dr. O into the discussion. Mr. Dr. O, do you think Russia will really allow, even though it has issued a statement, but will the European Union be able to use these frozen assets?
Well, I'm speaking to you from Brussels, which is the center of the issue. Von der Leyen is talking about the use of these assets for the reparation fund when, as if it were a done deal. At last word, it is anything but a done deal, not because of Russian opposition, but because of the opposition of our Prime Minister, Bart de Wever, who has pointed out that if this goes badly and a judgment in the courts is reached against Belgium and Euroclear, his country could be liable for a loss equivalent to 1/3 of its annual GDP. That's to say, Belgium would be ruined. Therefore, it is most improbable that von der Leyen's confidence statement about the redirection of these funds to assist the Ukrainian war effort. Let's not talk about reconstruction. It's certainly not on her plans. It would be used to give 2 more years of war, and so that Europe and the group around von der Leyen can stay in power, rearm Europe, and prepare for a war against Russia in 2027, 2028. That is absolutely out of discussion for any further movement on this peace plan.
All right. Firstly, I want to thank you, Mr. Doctor, for joining us. And now I want to also go back to Andrew Latham. And now, of course, do you think, Mr. Latham, that the areas that von der Leyen says she wants to use the frozen assets, she will be able to channel those funds there? And how do we see that happening?
Well, I would first of all echo my colleagues' views. I don't think it's going to happen because of legal proceedings that are likely to prevail. But even if that doesn't work, what country in the world that might be involved in a war that the Europeans don't approve of would invest in the euros or invest in the European Union, knowing that their investments might be confiscated? It is short-termism of the worst kind. It is posturing. It's not going to happen. And if it does, it's not going to be to the benefit of either Belgium in particular or Europe more generally.
Right. All right. Well, you two do seem to be on a consensus as far as the frozen assets are concerned. And I thank you both for joining us here at NewsX World. And with that, viewers, let's move on to news on the UK ban on pro-Palestinian assets. Now, the British government's decision to ban the pro-Palestinian group Palestine Action as a terrorist organization is being challenged in court on Wednesday. Lawyers for a co-founder argue the move misuses anti-terrorism laws. Palestine Action was described in July, making membership a crime. The group had increasingly targeted Israel-linked companies with direct action, including blocking entrances, smashing windows, and spraying red paint. The Home Office moved to ban it after escalating incidents, including a June break-in at RAF Bryce Norton, where activists damaged 2 planes. Critics say property damage is not terrorism and warn the ban restricts protest rights. More than 2,000 people have been arrested for signs supporting the group. In the High Court challenge succeeds, defendants could argue the proscription was unlawful. And moving on to now some news from France, where French police have arrested 4 people, including 2 Russian nationals, on suspicion of spying for a foreign power. The Paris prosecutors say that one of them, who was identified only as Anna N., a dual French-Russian national, had been under surveillance by France's domestic intelligence agency since January. Investigators believe she was gathering intelligence by approaching executives from French companies to obtain information tied to French economic interests. Anna N. is also the founder of SOS Donbass, a France-based association that campaigns for closer ties between Europe and Russia and for ending arms deliveries to Ukraine. She now faces possible penalties of up to 45 years in prison and fines of 600,000 euros on charges ranging from complicity to damaging historic heritage sites, organized crime, spying, and intelligence for a foreign power. The 3 others arrested, Vincent P. and Bernard F., both born in France, and Vyacheslav P., a Russian national, faced similar charges. And that's a wrap on the NewsX Eurozone. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.